Megatron. A villain who started off as a victim, D16's path to evil was characterized by severe disillusionment, unbridled rage, and an insatiable conquest for power. The name of Megatron itself is a twofold nod to his psyche. Adopting the name of Optimus Prime, a transformer whom D16 admired for his strength, lends credence to the notion of Megatron's emphasis on power. The exclusion of the last name of Prime highlights not only his disdain for authority, but more importantly, represents his unbalanced approach towards power while being devoid of the supporting moral character. The insignia that he chooses to wear at the end, the one that has become synonymous with the Decepticons, also mirrors the same notion of pick and choose, just like how he possesses the cog of Megatronus, but rejects the other attributes that make him a prime. The fact that Megatron would adopt the insignia is noteworthy, especially since it was one that was forcefully branded onto him by Sentinel. If anything, it suggests that Megatron is using his hatred as fuel for the fire, and what else could stir up more hatred than the visual reminder of the injustice he faced by an authority figure, one that was sadistically burned into his metallic frame. Overall, in looking back at the descent of D16, perhaps this was partially a mistake of Alpha Trion in that he bestowed the cog of one of the fallen primes to Megatron, and given that the primes are the most powerful transformers in Cybertron, this was too much power to entrust to someone emotionally volatile. As Alpha Trion mentioned, the cogs will enhance their uniqueness, but ultimately, it is not the cog that defines them, but the spark that resides in their core. In reviewing Megatron's transformation, we find that this rings true, most notably in the change of his color of his eyes from yellow to red. And if the cogs enhance the uniqueness of the Transformer, then perhaps the development of Megatron's arm cannon was a byproduct of his rage, as none of the other three Transformers who received cogs developed such overt weapons at an early stage. Power reveals one's character, and with the admiration for Sentinel Prime quickly dissipating after learning the truth, a void is created in Megatron, and voids have to be filled, in which case, it becomes full of hatred and tyranny. Perhaps Megatron could still be saved at the early stages after receiving his cog, but tragically, his next encounter with the High Guard of Cybertron only cemented his present course, emphasizing the use of might to subjugate others. In looking at Megatron's actions at the end, there are two main issues in view. The first would be his execution of Sentinel, while the second is his disillusionment with authority, which puts him at odds with Optimus Prime and heralds the start of their long-term rivalry. Of the two, I'd say that Megatron's disdain for authority is the more egregious one. The execution of Sentinel isn't ideal, as in this universe, perhaps a more fitting punishment would be removing Sentinel's cog and sentencing him to a life of mining for energon, a fate which might be considered even worse than death. So while his execution was gruesome, perhaps it could even be seen as an act of mercy on the part of Megatron. Next, we have Megatron's disdain for authority. While it's true that Megatron would naturally be skeptical of any future leadership, his animosity towards Optimus Prime is ultimately erroneous. Firstly, Sentinel may have been exceedingly evil, but as Alpha Trion mentioned, Sentinel is no prime, but was simply an aid to the primes. Therefore, what Sentinel did was an anomaly and should not have been projected onto other leaders of Cybertron. Secondly, Optimus was chosen by Primus to lead Cybertron, and the matrix of leadership is as clear an endorsement as can be. If anyone can be safely ruled out as a false prophet, so to speak, Optimus would be such a person. Megatron himself acknowledges the bestowal of the Matrix by Primus, so for him and the High Guard to rebel against Optimus is, in effect, a rebellion against his creator Primus himself, the logic of which is rather questionable. The cherry on top, however, is the petty jealousy over the fact that Primus gave Optimus the Matrix. Throughout the film, D16 was the more rational and rule-abiding bot, somewhat like an older brother to the reckless Orion Pax. It must have been a great source of resentment that someone he deems inferior would be deemed deserving of the Matrix, and perhaps this caused him to lose faith in Primus himself. Thomas Fuller had a quote that goes, "Scalded cats fear even cold water," a saying that suggests that our previous traumas can have a significant impact on our future mindset, and I think this quote is rather applicable to Megatron's situation. Just like how the hypothetical cat has been scalded by hot water and now fears the cold water that brings beneficial cooling refreshment, Megatron was traumatized by nefarious leadership and now refuses to be part of what could be a new age of peace and prosperity for Cybertron. And just like how Thomas Fuller's quote might be challenged by the notion of existentialism or the notion that an individual can rise above their past traumas to be free to choose their own path, sadly, this was not the case for Megatron, whose tragedy lay in the fact that he chose to use his autonomy to reinforce his jaded beliefs.